In this video, we're going to uncover the secret strategy to unlock massive scale with doing minimal to no rehab by using what's called a double closing. We'll talk about what it is, why it's important, and how you can go about using it in your own life to achieve massive results. So let's jump right in. So before we talk about a double closing, what it is, why it's important, and how you can go about doing it yourself, it's helpful to get grounded on the underlying issue that we're trying to solve for. And that's the true cost involved when acquiring properties via traditional or conventional means. If you recall from a previous video on purchasing property with no money, if you're going about acquisition using traditional means, you're going to have to come up with a down payment, you're going to have to cover loan costs, closing costs, miscellaneous costs. All of these costs add up very quickly and can make it very expensive. So if you're not holding a ton of cash and you don't know how to navigate these situations, real estate in general can seem somewhat inaccessible. Even if you are holding a ton of cash, there's a lot better things you can be doing with it than tying it up in real estate. You could be lending it, deploying it elsewhere. Any number of things would be better than spending it on a down payment and low costs every time you want to purchase a property. So while there are many strategies on how to go about navigating this situation, where you can buy properties without using any of your own cash, such as buying at a discount using private money, rehabbing the property, refinancing out to pay back your private money lender, pocketing the difference, a very common strategy used in the BRRRR method, as well as seller financing and subject to, also very powerful, very effective approaches. One of my favorite ways to go about it, which is less common, is to use what's called a double close on a turnkey or almost turnkey property that you purchase at a discount, which allows you to, in effect, do the same thing that you're doing when you're using private money and rehabbing a property, but to do it much quicker, essentially do it immediately so that you can deploy it again and again and again without having to go through the arduous process of doing extensive repairs, letting the property season, and all the things that go into a traditional BRRRR strategy. What a double close in a buy and hold context allows you to do is the same thing in principle, where you're purchasing a property at a discount and then financing the property at a higher ARV, but allows you to do it in an instant. So let's jump in here in an example so we first understand what a double close is, how it's traditionally used, and then we can understand how it's applied in this context and why it's so powerful for you. There's a few moving parts involved in a double close. It's not necessarily household knowledge, so don't worry if some of this isn't landing right at first. Go back, watch it again. I promise you it will make sense once you understand the different components. And I promise you, when done correctly, this is one of the best ways to go about achieving scale quickly. So traditionally, double closing is something that's used in the context of wholesaling. Don't be too concerned if you're not familiar with wholesaling or what wholesalers do. It's not a critical part of understanding double closing, but it is helpful to really grasp context and the nuts and bolts of the strategy. What wholesalers do is reach out to property owners, typically property owners who are in distressed situations. So they're in foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, tax liens, divorces, probate, code violations, and expired listings are very common examples of distress situations, which are situations where there is an inherent motivation for a property owner to be open to selling a property. Wholesalers will reach out to property owners, and what they'll try to do is get the property under contract. So make offers to buy the property at a discounted price. And once they get the property under contract, so they get the seller to agree to that discounted price, and they get that all in contract, they then take that contract and then they go find investors who are looking to buy properties, and they assign the contract to them at a higher price. So for example, if a wholesaler reaches out to a property owner and they get the property under contract for $100,000. They then find a buyer who's an investor, and they agree to assign that contract to the investor for $130,000. The wholesaler will make a profit of the difference, which is $30,000. So if we take a look at this example here, so here we have a home where, let's say, the seller is in foreclosure. So they are behind on their payments, and if they don't rectify the situation, the bank is going to repossess the property and foreclose on it. So they owe the bank $80,000 on the property. That's the outstanding debt that they're behind on, and they want to get rid of this. They want to get out of this situation. It's a bad situation. They're motivated to sell. The house needs work. So a wholesaler will reach out to this person. They'll call them, give them a direct mail, doesn't really matter. They'll get in contact with them some way, and then they'll make them an offer. And in order to determine that offer, the wholesaler is going to look at two things. And these are the same two things that we're looking at in the strategy we cover on buying properties with no money, and that's the ARV and the repair costs. So the wholesaler, in talking to the seller, knows that the house needs floors, needs paint, needs a roof, needs a bathroom, needs HVAC, and that the total cost of these repairs is going to be around $40,000. The wholesaler also knows that the after repair value, the ARV of the home, is $300,000. And they're basing that off similar homes that are rehabbed that have been sold within a given area close to this home. And they can say with a high degree of confidence that they will be able to get that amount if this house were rehabbed and an investor wanted to sell it after rehabbing it. So the total cost of repairs is $40K, the ARV is $300K. They then know the seller owes the bank $80K. Maybe the seller wants some extra cash in their pocket too, but really they just want to get out of this situation. So the wholesaler will make an offer and get the home under contract at a discounted price. Let's say they get that seller to agree to sell that home to them for $100,000 cash. Seller's motivated to sell. They're in foreclosure. They want to get rid of it. They don't really know how to go about doing that. Along comes a wholesaler, says, hey, I'll give you $100,000. Take this property off your hands and you'll be able to clear your name, have a little bit of extra money in your pocket, and go about your business. To the seller, that might be a great deal because they're not able to get the house off otherwise. The wholesaler knows that they can get an investor to pay even more, because even if you account for the cost of repairs and the purchase price at $100,000, there's still a lot of room of profit to be made if the ARV on this home is $300,000. So what a wholesaler would do, once they have the property under contract for $100,000, meaning they have a signed purchase and sale agreement for that amount, the wholesaler will then go and look for an investor to then assign the contract to them. And all that means is they're going to say, hey, Mr. Investor, I have this property. It needs $40,000 worth of work. I have it under contract. I will assign that contract to you for $130,000, meaning you will purchase the property from the original seller, but you will purchase it for $130,000. So the wholesaler who has the contract for $100,000 is then assigning it for $130,000 and will be able to keep that $30,000 difference. The investor is getting a heavily discounted property for $130,000 that they are willing and able to put $40,000 of work into, which would have their cost totaling at $170,000. But because they understand the ARV and because they're willing to do the rehab, they know, and their business is to improve the home and flip it and make a profit. So they know they can purchase it at $130K, the $40K worth of work into it, and then sell that home for $300K and make over $100,000 in a spread and $100,000 in profit. That is fundamentally what a wholesaler does. They act as a broker between sellers who want to sell their homes, most commonly when they're in distressed situations, and investor buyers who want to take heavily discounted homes, put the work into them, and then flip them or refinance out at the improved ARV. So the investor makes a profit, the wholesaler makes a profit on the contract assignment, and the seller gets out of a bad situation that they want to get out of. So when everything goes according to plan, that can be a really good situation for all three parties involved. Now, once a contract is assigned, the way the mechanics of the actual closing occurs is as follows. On the day of closing, the investor, who we'll call party C, who's the end buyer, they're going to take the $130,000 associated with the B2C contract, which is the amount that they're purchasing the home for, and they're going to send that to title. Remember, title is just the company that handles the transaction. Title company is then going to take that money and disperse it accordingly. They're going to disperse the $30,000 spread to the wholesaler. Remember, the A to B contract's only for $100,000, so the seller is going to get that $100,000, and the difference is that $30,000 that title is going to send to the wholesaler. So that's the profit, the spread as it's called, that the wholesaler is making. So the seller gets their house sold, they pay off their debt, they keep the difference, they get a little bit of extra money in their pocket. Remember, they owed $80K, they got $100K for the home, so they keep $20K in their pocket, they're happy. The wholesaler makes that $30K profit, and the investor gets the property at a discount. So everybody's happy. If it all goes to plan, it can be great for A, B, and C, because ultimately they all get what they want in the end. Now, if wholesalers could, they would use this method of assigning contracts all the time. However, wholesalers operate in an environment that's heavily regulated, and those regulations can differ from state to state. Some states limit wholesaling altogether or prohibit it. Some states place rules around how you can go about it or how many wholesaling transactions you can do. And irrespective, there are situations for wholesalers where they may not want the seller to know that they're wholesaling the property. If the seller gets under contract for $100,000 and finds out the wholesaler sold it for $130,000, they may feel negatively about missing out on that $30K and back out of the deal, or cause friction between them and the wholesaler. So for this reason, in addition to some of the regulatory constraints, wholesalers will navigate situations where they can't assign a contract cleanly by using the double close. So the way that the mechanics of a double close work, as opposed to assigning the contract to the end buyer, the wholesaler actually closes on the property in that they complete a legitimate and legal purchase of the property, and they immediately resell it to the end buyer at the B2C contract price. In this way, in that they are buying the property, they are closing on it once, and then immediately selling it, there are in effect two closings. And that's why it is called a double closing. So the mechanics of a double close on the day of closing are as follows. The investor, just like they would in the situation of a contract assignment, is going to send the money associated with the B2C contract, which is $130,000, to title. That's the amount of money they need to purchase and complete the B2C contract. Title is going to hold that money in escrow because they can't complete that B2C contract until they first complete the A to B contract, which is the first close on the two legs of a double close. So in order for title to complete that A to B contract, the wholesaler is also going to send their money associated with their contract, which is $100K, to title, and title is going to keep that money in escrow. Title is then going to perform the first close of the double close, where the wholesaler is buying the property from the seller. The wholesaler is party B. They are going to send $100K to title. Title is then going to disperse the $100K to the seller, and title is performing a legal transaction of official record where the wholesaler is purchasing the property from the seller for $100,000. So the wholesaler sends that money to title. Title completes the purchase, disperses that money to the seller, and that purchase is recorded as part of legal record, thus completing the first leg of the closing. And then what title is going to do is take the $130K that the investor sent, and they are going to disperse the $130K to the wholesaler. So the wholesaler who just bought this property is then selling it to the investor who is now buying it, going to send their money to title. Title is then going to disperse that $130K to the wholesaler. Now remember, the wholesaler has already paid $100K, so the $130K that they're getting is still a $30K difference. The profit that they're making is the same, just the mechanics of how they're going about completing the transaction that's different. So once that's complete, the second closing of the double closing is complete, and the investor now owns the home. Same situation as when the contract is signed. The seller has their house sold off their debt. They get to keep the spread. The wholesaler makes a $30K spread themselves, and the investor gets the property at a discount. One thing to note when looking at this is if the wholesaler has to send $100K to title in order to complete the A to B leg and the first closing of the double close, naturally the question arises of where are they going to get this $100,000? They have to literally send $100,000 cash in order to perform the first close, which is an official purchase of a property. In those situations, a wholesaler would use a transactional funder who would lend them the $100,000 for a fee. Typically that fee is between 1% and 3% of the loan amount. So the transactional funder would bring that $100K to the table that gets sent to title. And once the double closing is complete, title would then take a portion of that $130K that would then be dispersed to the wholesaler. And once the double closing is complete, title would then send the amount of money that the transactional funder lent to the wholesaler plus their fee back to the transactional funder. So because the transactional funder brought the $100,000, title would disperse that $100,000 back to the transactional funder plus their fee. So if it's 1.5% on that $100,000, it would be $1,500 that they would take out of the wholesaler's $30K profit that they're making. So this is how wholesalers can perform double closing even if they don't have the cash to perform the A to B contract. So in that scenario, instead of the wholesaler sending the money to title, they would use a transactional funder who would send that $100K to cover the A to B contract and complete the first close. And as payment for sending that $100K, they would get a 1.5% return on their money. So $101,500 out of the $130K that investor C is sending, which would just take that $1,500 fee out of the wholesaler spread. So the wholesaler ends up making $28,500, but they're able to do a double closing without having to come up with $100,000. So this is how a double closing works in the context of wholesaling, which gives explanation to why it's used in that context. Wholesalers may have regulatory constraints, or they may not want the seller to know that they're wholesaling, so they'll use a double close. In terms of what this means for you, the investor, and using it in a buy and hold strategy, let's first take a moment and reassociate with the costs, with all of the costs involved when purchasing a property traditionally. Let's say, for example, you get a property under contract for $100,000. You then go to a bank or lending institution, try to acquire long-term financing for that property in the form of a 30-year note, like a mortgage. That lender is going to lend you 80%, give or take, of the purchase amount that you have the property under contract for. Long-term notes and the lenders that write them usually involve you having some skin in the game in the form of a down payment. So that home that you're getting for $100,000, you're going to have to put down $20,000 as a down payment. You're going to have to put down $5,000 in loan costs, and you're going to have to put down $2,000 in closing costs for a total of $27,000 in costs for purchasing a $100,000 home. Now, if you had to put down $27,000 every time you're buying a house, for obvious reasons, that will slow you down considerably than if you only had to put down $10,000 or put down nothing. And this is where a double close, which is used commonly for wholesalers, can also be used for you, the buy and hold investor. So now let's break down how you go about doing that. So that instead of having to pay $27,000 each time, you can pay $10,000 or less for the same property, and you can scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and above times quicker. So now let's go over how to go about using a double close as a buy and hold investor, so you can take advantage of the ability to redeploy the money that you otherwise would have had tied up in down payments and closing costs. So double closing in a buy and hold strategy involves a few critical components. The first component, which is critical across the board in any strategy, is the ability to find a property and get it under contract at a price that is discounted, meaning a price that is less than what it will appraise for. If you are not able to do this, the double closing will not work. So you must be able to land a property at a purchase price that is less than what you will be able to get the property appraised for. The difference in this context versus a BRRRR strategy context, which is what contract assignments usually are involved in, is that in a BRRRR strategy, the end buyer investor is going to be doing some sort of rehab of the property. Whereas in this situation, we're looking at properties that are turnkey or very close to turnkey that will appraise at the higher amount than what you're buying it for without doing any work. Now, these deals can be harder to find, but they are out there. The second component that's critical is you must have a partner who's a separate entity, will act as the B player in the ABC equation, because that partner is someone you'll be sending money to and relying on them to send the money back to you. And we'll explain what that means. But if you have these two critical components, a deal where you have a property under contract for less than it'll appraise for, a partner that you trust that's willing to play ball, you're in business. So let's go to the example here. So we have a house here. Now remember, we're looking for a home that's turnkey. We have the home and we see that we can get comps on this home in the area around 135K. Now this home has been listed on the market for 120K. That's the purchase price seller has it listed for. And we also see that it's been on the market for a while. So for whatever reason, they're not able to sell it for 120K. Commonly what will happen is sellers will have a home on the market. They're able to get the home under contract, but the contract might fall through. Maybe the buyer wasn't able to get financing. Maybe something came up on inspection. Whatever it may be, the longer the home is on the market, the more frustrated the seller is going to be. So the seller we have here is unable to sell the house. They're willing to take a lower offer in cash and they want to get rid of it. The house has been on the market for a while and they're just ready to get this thing off their hands. They don't want to deal with someone who has to acquire financing. Maybe they have had some negative experiences with that and they just want a cash offer that'll get it off their hands. Now, if you recall, in a wholesaling context, the seller is party A, the wholesaler is party B, and the investor is party C. In the context where you're using this strategy for a buy and hold situation, party B will be your partner who you trust, and party C will be you, the end buyer. So just like you would as a wholesaler, you would call the seller, negotiate with them, make an offer on the home that you know is going to appraise for 135 based on comps, and get this home under contract for $100,000. So you're purchasing a home that will appraise for 135K at a price that's lower than 135K. In this example, 100K. You're purchasing a home that is worth on paper 135K or 100K. You're able to do that because the seller's frustrated, the home has been on the market for a while, you're offering cash, they just want to get it off their hands, and you're able to do that for them. So because of that, you're able to get a lower offer accepted. Now on this A to B contract, you're going to list as the buyer LLC associated with your partner. And this is someone, again, who you should trust a lot, because at the end of this, they're going to have to send you money. Explain what that means. Because your partner, we'll call that LLC1, is the B player, and that the seller is selling the house to that LLC. Think of it as a shell LLC. You can then create a second contract between that LLC and the LLC you want to hold the property in, call that LLC2, where your partner, LLC1, sells you, LLC2, that home at purchase price of $135K. So in effect, your partner is acting as the wholesaler and reselling you the home at the higher purchase price. Now, because they're reselling you the home at $135K, you can then go to a lender, say, hey, I'm buying this home from LLC1 for a price of $135K. And because your purchase price is $135K instead of $100K, your lender give you a loan based on that $135K amount, which with an 80% LTV, a loan that they'll give you for $108,000. So you'll use that $108,000 loan to cover the A to B transaction and any closing costs. So that loan will get sent to title along with the down payment that you'll send in addition, which in this case would be $27,000 to total the $135,000 to complete the B2C contract. So let's really break this down so it lands and take a look at the mechanics. So on the day of the double close, you are buying the property from LLC1, who's your partner, for $135,000. You're getting financed on this amount. So at this point, you have that financing, which is $108K, that gets sent to title. You send the remaining $27K, which totals to the $135K that you need to title. They take that and hold it in escrow, because remember, they can't perform the B2C until the A to B is complete. So they hold the money in escrow. B will send their $100,000 to title, which remember, they can also use a transactional funder to get that $100K. Title then performs the first close of the double close, where LLC1 is buying the property from the seller for $100K. So they'll receive the $100K and disperse it to the seller. And in doing so, the first close will be complete, and LLC1 now owns the property for $100,000. Title will then complete the second leg, which is the B2C contract, where LLC1 sells that home they just bought for $100,000 to LLC2 for $135,000. LLC2 is providing that $135,000 by financing that they got on the $135,000 purchase price, as well as the down payment. So the total of $135,000, $108K in a loan, $27K in a down payment that's already been sent to title, is used to complete that purchase, and the second close is then complete, and you, LLC2, now own the home and have gotten it financed at the ARV of $135K as opposed to the $100K purchase price that the A to B contract was performed at. Now that $108K is then used to pay back the transactional funder as well as the closing costs, and at this point, LLC1, who remember was the seller who sold it to LLC2, now has the $27,000 down payment that LLC2 used. Here's where the important part of trusting your partner comes in, because then you will now need to get your down payment back from LLC1, but your partner will need to transfer your money back outside of title, outside of escrow, so that you can get your money back and do it again. So you get a property under contract for $100,000. This property is worth $135K. If you were to just go and get it financed at $100K, it costs you $27,000 with your down payment and your loan costs and your closing costs. You'd have a lower note, a lower monthly payment, but you would have $27,000 that you'd otherwise have liquid, tied up, or otherwise spent on costs. So what you do is you get the property under contract in an entity that your partner owns for that purchase price of 100K. And then you have that entity sell the home to you at a higher price of 135K, which is a price that it'll appraise for, so that you can get financing on that higher price, which is the purchase price of that B2C transaction. Use that financing along with your down payment to complete the B2C transaction, which will cover the initial 100K purchase, and then have the remainder, which your partner now has, sent back to you instead of staying with the seller, so that you can then use that money and redeploy it again and again and again. Now, the reason why it's so important that you land the ARV correctly is because this is the amount that the lender who's financing the B2C will need to see on appraisal. They will not lend you more money than the property's worth. So you have to get the property appraised at the amount or above of the B2C contract. Additionally, again, I'll reiterate, the B entity in this scenario must be someone that you trust, because when you close on the property, the money from the financing, the $108,000, is sent from the lender to title. That covers the A to B and the costs. Additionally, you're also sending the down payment of $27K to title that's dispersed to the B entity, LLC1. As far as title is concerned, LLC1, your partner, is selling you a home. So they will perform the transaction as any other. They'll take the money from you and give it to them. You will then need them to give you the money back outside of title after the transaction's done, so that you can redeploy it. So your partner in this scenario must be someone you trust, and it must be someone who would never keep money and steal from you. Now, the reason you need this to be your partner, as opposed to just creating two different LLCs and doing it yourself, is the B2C contract that involves getting financing on the 135K purchase price will involve a lender who's going to write you a mortgage of some sort on that property, on that purchase. And the lender will typically not do that if you are selling one property from an LLC you own to another LLC you own. The lender will generally want to see property being sold from a completely separate entity to you. So you'll need a partner to do this, as opposed to just selling it to yourself. That way your financing will go through, and because it's your partner that you trust, they'll simply give you your money back after everything's said and done, so that you can use it again. Generally speaking, in a double close scenario, because the properties you're purchasing are turnkey, it's unlikely that you will be able to get all of your money back all the time. Meaning, the example we gave where the property purchase price for the A to B is 100K and the property appraises at 135K is a really sweet example, because you have a nice spread between 100 and 135 where you can get the financing, cover your costs, cover your initial A to B transaction, and essentially have a cash flowing property without spending anything out of pocket, because your partner gave you your money back. Whereas in most cases, it'll probably be something closer where you're getting a property that'll appraise for 120K at a purchase price as 100K, so that ultimately, if you include loan costs and closing costs, you'll have to come out of pocket around 10K. That 10K is still significantly better than having to spend 27K each time you purchase a property. If you only spent 10K each time versus 27K each time, you can buy 3 times as many properties as you otherwise would have. So while the mechanics may seem complex, once you really grasp them, it's relatively straightforward. The challenge in this isn't in the mechanics, it's in finding deals on turnkey properties that you can get appraised for higher amounts without doing any work. While this is harder than finding other types of deals, it is not impossible. It's something that I've done several times, as of people I've coached. This is something that will allow you to do the BRRRR method in effect lightning quick. You can do the same thing, get your money back, cover your costs, even pocket some of the money and still cash flow, but do it without any rehab involved. It all lies in your ability to find the deal and your ability to work with a partner who you trust to send you back the down payment outside of title. If you can land those two things, this is one of the best ways to achieve scale as fast as possible. Doesn't require any contractors, doesn't require any work, it doesn't require any seasoning period. It is a ridiculously slick way to go about acquisition when other methods aren't applicable or you just want to get into more properties quicker. Now, if a lot of this isn't landing, don't worry. This is the bread and butter of what I coach. It's an advanced strategy that can take some repetition to really land. But once you grasp it, I guarantee you this will be one of the most valuable parts of your repertoire. So take the time to really learn it. Hit me up if you want to learn more about our coaching. If you need the guidance on the ins and outs and you want a partner there showing you the nuts and bolts, guiding you along the way, let's talk business. Either way, I'll see you on the next one.